Hi, welcome to another episode of Relax, I Got This. And I have a question for you. Are you a first time home buyer? Meaning you really want to get into home ownership, but you're struggling with that first entry point, the down payment. You have a good job, you have good credit, but with inflation, maybe you've got some student debt, maybe you've got other obligations that are just keeping you from reaching that goal at the time frame that you want to. Well, my guest today, his name is Frank Rohde, and he has established a company called Ownify, and they have a unique model to get first-time buyers into homes. And I am so excited for this opportunity to come to home buyers in our state of Texas. So, welcome to the show, Frank Rohde.
A real estate transaction is potentially the largest investment we make in our lives. Whether you're buying and selling your personal home or investing in real estate, you need the knowledge to make the right decisions. Get ready. Robin is a Texas realtor and has the experience to give you the information you need to make the right decisions. Welcome to Relax, I Got This with your host, Robin McCoy.
All right, and Frank, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm excited to learn about this concept, fractional ownership.
Well, thanks for having me, Robin. Excited to be here. And yeah, let's dive in.
Let's dive in. So, like I said, I've been in business for over 16 years. I have, I've worked with investors, I've worked with buyers, I've worked with sellers, and I have never heard of Ownify and I've never heard of fractional ownership. So, why don't we go into just kind of a brief description and then we'll dive a little deeper into it.
Sounds good. So the reason we started Ownify about 2 years ago now is really to help first-time home buyers or home buyers who are struggling to get into the market. And I think everyone knows this anecdotally, right? Young people, first-time buyers in particular, are struggling. And there's a bunch of underlying reasons, right? House prices are up. We're short housing in the US. Mortgage rates have reverted to what I'd say is their long run average, right? 6.5 today, probably coming down a little bit, but they're not going to be in the 2s and 3s.
Right.
We have inflation and cost of living and student debt that's weighing on people and their ability to save for a down payment. And then you have Wall Street and private equity coming in, buying houses for cash, right? So as a first-time buyer, you're competing with Blackstone, right? Or some other firm.
People with the deepest endless pockets where
Exactly.
they can go do whatever they want.
Yeah, and for first-time buyers, the mortgage tax deduction is no longer relevant because they don't itemize it, most likely when they're buying a starter home. So you've got all these things coming together that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago, right? And they're all conspiring to make it harder and harder for first-time buyers. And so and maybe but just the background on this is I ran a company for 15 years called Nomis, and we built the pricing engine for a lot of the large mortgage lenders. So I spent a good part of my career in the bowels of mortgage math.
Oh God!
And
sounds really fun to me.
I mean, it is actually really fascinating. But one of the things I saw in the data was exactly this problem: more first-time buyers getting squeezed out, not able to compete, right? Struggling to get their foot in the door. And so ultimately sold that company and started Ownify with a mission to help first-time buyers with an alternative on-ramp. And so the first question we asked, and this is a long-winded answer to your question, so just bear with me. The first question we asked is, why do you have to buy your home 100%? Why do you have to buy all of it, right? Why can't you buy a piece of it and then another piece, i.e. buy your home over time, right? And if you think about what a mortgage does, the traditional way in which we've been buying homes for 70, 80 years is you buy the home, meaning you get the title, and then you turn around and you pledge the title to the bank or the lender.
Okay.
You say, well, I really don't own the home until I've paid off the mortgage, right? And that is the traditional model. So you have the obligation to either pay off that balance over 30 years or eventually refi it. And so the question we asked is there a different model that we could build where we allow the customer to buy their home brick by brick, right? i.e. piece by piece over time. And so fractional ownership, to answer your question, is really just that. We've found a way to fractionalize homes. And what we do is we turn them into 10,000 bricks. And a brick is really just a membership interest or a share in the entity that holds title to the home. So as a realtor, you'll appreciate this, right?
Okay.
The entity that holds title is an LLC, limited liability company, and that LLC issues 10,000
Right.
shares, and those shares can be bought and sold over time by the home buyer, the person who lives in the home, and investors who contribute capital to the purchase of the home. And so at the
Okay.
core, this fractionalization, right, into 10,000 bricks allows us to sell and buy these interests in the home at a much reduced price. So for, let's say, a $400,000 home, you issue 10,000 bricks. Each brick is worth $40, right? And that makes it affordable for customers to buy equity in the home over time, right? And build equity and effectively buy the home brick by brick over time, rather than buying it all at once and then paying it off over 30 years.
Okay.
So that's,
So
and I'm
this
sure there's
isn't
going to be a bunch of
actually a
questions
new
coming out of
thing.
that.
It's new for it's new for first time buyers, right? So this has been going on in maybe the commercial type world, real estate world forever. It's just you've made a pivot and brought it to the consumer themselves.
Correct. So
Is that
fractional
right?
ownership kind of exists. You're absolutely right, in commercial, right? So you have syndications, you have investors coming together, and they're buying a big commercial building.
Mm-hmm.
It exists in vacation homes, right? So you have Picasso and others
Right.
who basically say you can buy an eighth of a share of a home, and that gives you the right to live in it for an
An
eighth
eighth
of the
of the
time,
year, or whatever
an eighth
that
of the
is.
year.
Right.
And where we've rethought this is to say, well, there are really three pieces here in our agreement and in the structure that we've built. And the first and important one is the customer has the exclusive right to live in the home and make
Okay.
changes to the home and use it the way you would traditionally use a home, right, for whatever purpose you see fit. And so that occupancy right is exclusively to the first time buyer. The equity itself, i.e. the ownership interests in the home, those are the ones that are shared or fractionalized, right,
Right.
between the first time buyer who builds equity over time and a pool of investors who we source, who co-invests in the home. The
Okay.
investors are invisible. They don't have obviously they don't have occupancy rights, right? They can't come by on Saturday
Nobody's
for the
coming and
barbecue.
knocking on the door and
No,
saying, I
exactly.
need to spend the night."
Yeah, exactly. So, and so in a way, it's not dissimilar from the way the mortgage industry works, right? Which is a mortgage gets issued and then sold and securitized, and some number of people
Right.
and all over the world end up owning a fraction of that mortgage, right? And
Right.
that's invisible to the consumer. So what we've done is we've basically created this structure where we partner investors with first-time buyers
Okay.
to purchase a home. Now, why does that work? The reason it works is that we can significantly lower the entry cost. So we've structured this to require a 2% down payment from the first-time buyer.
Okay.
And with a 2% down payment, and no other costs. There's no closing costs. They don't have to pay the buyer's agent, whatever comes out of this
All the
snarl settlement. Who knows?
yeah.
It's 2%. So it's, $400,000 home. You put $8,000 down on day one. That buys you your 200 bricks or your 2% on day one. And then we take care of everything else. So we lower the entry point cost. And then the monthly payment is actually today lower than the equivalent on a mortgage, plus the maintenance and insurance and taxes that you normally have to pay as a mortgagor or as a mortgage borrower. So so we can lower the entry cost, we can lower the monthly cost, and importantly, we can create a cash offer for that first time buyer, right? To come in and say, on behalf of this first time buyer, we're making a cash offer, we're buying the home, we're placing the home into an LLC, and that first time buyer now becomes a shareholder in that LLC.
Okay.
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 So on
Makes
day
sense.
one, the customer comes in, they put down 2%, they buy 200 of the 10,000 bricks, that's their 2%.
Right.
And they now have an agreement over 5 years where every month they make a fixed monthly payment. So important pieces that there's a fixed payment structure for 5 years. And that payment really pays for two things.
Okay.
one part pays for effectively rent on the bricks that the customer hasn't bought, right? So
Has not
again,
bought.
not bought, exactly. So fractional
Okay.
ownership. So think about it as I have my bricks, right? On day one, I might have a
Right.
small corner of the kitchen. That's my,
Right.
but I'm renting the rest of the house. Um,
Okay.
so I'm paying rent for that. But every month, I'm also buying more bricks. And
Okay.
on average, the customer buys roughly 13 bricks a month, which
Okay.
over 12 months gets you to 160 bricks, and over 5 years gets you to roughly 800 bricks. And including the 200 you buy up front, that gets you to 1,000 of the 10,000 bricks. So
Okay.
roughly 10% of the equity. And
Okay.
the reason we did it that way is to say, it's basically allow the customer to say, I'm building from 2 to 10%. I'm building up my stack of bricks over those 5 years, which means I own more and more of the house. It means I have to pay less and less rent. And with 10%, let's say at the end of 5 years,
Yeah.
or if you can get there sooner, you can do it sooner. But with 10%, I can go out and get a traditional mortgage. And now I have the third piece of the agreement is a purchase option to buy the remaining 90%, right? Or buy the entirety
Okay.
of the house from the investor pool.
Okay.
And so
All right.
if
So
you
now
kind
I
of
can
think
go
about
get
all
a
these pieces
mortgage. I
working,
got equity. The house I bought it 5 years ago for 400,000. Now it's worth 420,000.
let's say, yeah,
And so now I go to Bob the lender, and he gives me a mortgage for 420. I buy the house from the investment group. They get their return through that equity,
yep,
and everybody runs down the road.
exactly. They get their return through that equity purchase. They will have, the investor group has gotten rental income along the way, right? Because
Right.
keep in mind, the bricks that the investors fund, those earn rental income.
Okay.
The bricks the customer has already bought, they don't pay rent on, right? So for an investor, what we've structured is effectively the ability to invest as an equity investor, not as a lender, but as an equity investor
Right.
in that home, and I'm earning rental income and I'm getting the appreciation. Right.
Right.
So as an investor, that's attractive because I can participate in home price appreciation, get passive income along the way, and I'm helping a first-time buyer. And so if you take all these pieces together, really what Ownify is, it's an on-ramp for first-time buyers.
Right.
It's that vehicle that allows the buyer to jump over the down payment hurdle, pick a home out of the MLS, buy it, right? And then when they're ready, if they want to, buy it the traditional way with a mortgage, right? Or they can stay in the Ownify structure and just renew and keep building equity, right?
Oh, okay.
Without the.
So they don't have to either buy or sell at that 5 years.
Correct. They can renew and just
They
keep
could
going.
renew and continue for another year, 2 year, 3 years, whatever that looks like.
Correct. Exactly right.
Okay, so I'm gonna run through this as a buyer, right?
Yeah.
So I find the house, and I've got Robin, my amazing realtor,
Yep.
and we go and we are we've already applied with you guys with Ownify. We already have all that set up. So now I go to the house, we write an offer through this LLC, and it's cash. So here's your
Yep.
400,000.
Yep.
I've just put 2% down, but whatever the contract requires, will be done with the rest of the investment group, right?
Yep.
Because my client puts 2% down. So who is you're paying for closing costs, all of that. So we close. Now I've got the keys to the house.
Yep.
I'm in charge of maintenance. I'm in charge of all of that.
No.
Hi, I'm Robin McCoy, a Texas realtor for over 15 years. As the adult child of a senior needing to make a living change, I know firsthand the stress that can be involved in guiding our seniors and their families through the challenging decisions surrounding senior living. From adapting your current home for aging in place to finding the right senior community, I provide comprehensive support tailored to your unique needs. By offering these specialized services, I aim to make the transition to senior living as smooth as possible, providing you and your family with peace of mind and confidence in every decision. For more information, go to robinmccoyseniorsolutions.com and let me take some of the stress of senior moves away. Relax. I've got this. I'm in charge of maintenance. I'm in charge of all of that.
No, that's so the
No.
LLC covers maintenance and
Okay. So it
repairs.
needs a new roof in 6 months because hail comes charging through Dallas,
Yeah,
and now we need a new roof. So the investment, the LLC, let's just call it the LLC, because they have ownership of the house, they replace the roof.
correct. Now, obviously, for that, we have insurance in place, right? And we do
Sure.
that on a portfolio basis. And we contract with local property management, companies to make sure that we have an efficient repair and maintenance process. But one of the big benefits to the buyer is you put 2% down, you have your fixed monthly payment, and we call it there are no surprises, right?
Right.
You don't have to worry about anything else. The roof needs repair, we'll take care of it. The water heater breaks, needs replacing, or the AC in Texas, right? Um, we'll take care of that because, again, you're a tenant of the LLC. The LLC is
Right.
your landlord. The LLC will take care of that. You're also a shareholder of the LLC. And that's kind of the unique thing that's
Yeah.
new. It does actually exist today in New York City co-ops where people rent a unit or buy a unit and they're also a shareholder of the corporation that owns the
Right.
building, right? So we've kind of rethought that structure to work with single family homes to say, you're a tenant of the LLC, you're also an owner, a partial owner of the LLC, and that gives you all the occupancy rights under a lease agreement, but also the shareholder rights and the equity accumulation, right, as a shareholder in that LLC.
So how do I, as that new, you know, tenant slash homeowner, right?
Oni.
How do I, what's that?
We call them
Oh, I'm
the
an
Oni.
Oni?
Yeah, because
Okay, that's what
they're
that, I
more than
saw
a
that
tenant
Oni
and they're
on the
not an
website. I'm
owner
like,
in the traditional way, right?
okay, so they're an Oni. I
Yeah.
love it. So how do I, the Oni, earn more bricks, right? So I'm paying, pick a number. My rent, my monthly put in
Yeah.
is, I don't know, 2,000 a month, just to make a number. How does that attribute to me buying or acquiring more of the ownership up to my 10%?
Yeah. So your payment is a fixed number. Let's say it's 2,400 a month.
Okay.
And out of that payment, a portion pays for rent. And that's for argument's sake, that's $2,100. And another portion buys equity. That's, let's say, $300.
Okay.
So your payment of 2,400 never changes. That's fixed for the 5 years. So you know what your budget is and what you're on the hook for. Underneath that, the portion that goes to rent and the portion that goes to equity shifts over time. And the rent portion actually goes
Okay.
down. The equity portion goes up, right? And that makes sense because back to the principle, the more bricks you stack, the more bricks you buy, the fewer you have to pay rent on. Now, what's
Right.
important is that the rental yield, right? If you put your investor hat on and say, I've put money to work, I've bought bricks, and as an investor, I've bought bricks in the home.
Right.
I want to get a fixed rental yield over 5 years. So the rental yield doesn't change, but because fewer bricks need to be rented, the rent payment itself goes down over time. And so for the consumer, the equity build happens automatically as they make their monthly payment. And every month, as that payment is made, they buy a certain number of bricks, always at the current market value of the home. And so this is an interesting concept,
Okay.
right? The home, let's say we go back to the example, it's a $400,000 single family home. You buy it on day one. Each brick is worth $40. Let's say a month later, that same home is now worth $401,000, right?
Okay.
We strike a valuation. We use automated valuation models to do that. And therefore, a brick is worth $40.10. So the customer buys bricks at that value. Let's say a month later, the home price falls and it's worth $399. So now the bricks are worth $39.90. Customer buys bricks at that value. And so
Okay.
really what that means is you're buying those bricks, you're buying those shares in the home at whatever floating value in any given month, which is the same as what you're doing with your 401k or a mutual fund,
Right.
dollar
Right.
cost averaging, right? You're actually buying slightly more on dips and you're buying slightly less on peaks. And over a 5-year period, that works out to kind of dollar cost average the purchase of equity in the home.
That's really interesting because, you're right. The down payment, especially these days, um, is a challenge for
Yeah.
first time home buyers. It's a challenge. Once you have a home and you sell it with equity, you've got a down payment, but it's getting into the game, the first time that is the challenge. And if you're going to rent anyway, so if you're going to spend $2,400 on a downtown apartment, or not even, and not a real nice one necessarily at $2,400, then why not put, it's almost like a lease to own.
It is, with a real ownership piece built into
Yeah.
it. That's exactly
Yeah.
and that's a big part of the innovation, right? Is we thought long and hard about how do we provide true ownership in the home to the customer, right?
Yeah.
And ownership in the truest sense of, if you take care of the home and you treat it well, your value goes up, right?
Right.
If you trash the
Right.
place, the value goes down. And so you need a mechanism, and shares in the LLC are that mechanism. The
Yeah.
bricks, right, are that
Yeah.
mechanism to
Yeah.
say, hey, you're owning a fraction of the home, and you have the ability to increase that fraction. If you think about back to your point about the down payment, it's a big hurdle. I came here from Germany as for college, and then moved to San Francisco, and eventually was able to buy a condo. But the only way I could buy a condo is by getting help from my parents.
Right.
Right? They helped me with the down payment, which is what more than half of first-time buyers do today.
Which most do, right? Yeah.
Right. And so you think about that, which is, okay, that's great if your parents have money, if you have a family background that includes that ability to, put down some money. Fantastic.
Right.
What about the other half? What about the people who don't have the wealthy parent, right? Who's able to help? And that's really one of the kind of societal and mission components here for Ownify, is to say, hey, we should help people who don't have that background, and we should help
Yeah.
people who are, who have good jobs and good incomes, but haven't been able to save. Maybe because they have student debt, maybe because they've lived in Dallas, which is expensive, or in San Francisco, or in
Which
Raleigh,
is
or
more
whatever.
expensive.
Right.
I, li-
Um,
I lived in San Francisco. I know how expensive it
okay.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the core mission here is really, how do we enable home ownership for those people who don't have the background
Just to
in
have a resource. They don't
the
have the
resources, familiar
resources that
wealth.
some
Right.
other ones do.
Correct. Exactly.
I mean, I think it's a very unique idea. And I think it's, I get calls, in Texas, rent to own doesn't really exist, right? In the state of Texas. You can do it, but you have to do it in certain ways, and
Mhm.
you need attorneys, and you need, different agreements, and you've got to have, well, even just like you said, a prearranged purchase agreement, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of that 5 years, what are we going to do?
Trade or Schwab account or what have you, right?
Right.
Here's the paper trail of how I've built up my down payment. So let's say the home is worth 420,000. The customer has built up 10% of the equity. That's 42,000. That's their down payment. They get a loan for the balance, right? And at the closing table, Ownify cashes out the ONI, right? So the ONI effectively sells their equity to Ownify. Ownify wires them the amount, the $42,000. That becomes the down payment. It all happens at the closing table, right?
Okay.
And the LLC is obligated to sell the home to the ONI. So that is part of the contract, right?
Okay.
Is the ONI has the exclusive right. Now, one of the benefits for the ONI is they can take all the time they need. There's no competitor in the sale, right? It's a
Right.
known purchase price, because the purchase price is the same price as the one that you bought bricks at last month, right?
Right, because you're doing that regular, evaluation of the property. So there's
Exactly.
no,
So if
and
it,
there's
let's
not
say
an
half of
appraisal
the unit,
cost then, right? There's no, you're not paying appraisal $500 to $800
right?
for that.
Exactly. So it's a known purchase price at that point, right? Because it's the same price as the prior month, and then you execute the transaction, and after that, the ONI has ownership the traditional way, meaning they hold title. They probably pledge title to the mortgage lender, right? Depending on the
Right.
state we're in, and then they make their payment on a monthly basis.
But now they own it outright. Now that equity is all theirs. So they live there another 5 years and now it's worth 440 and they choose to sell it, it's all theirs.
Correct. They still have the mortgage balance to pay off, right?
Sure.
But whatever
But it's
appreciation
yeah,
occurs between that 420 to 440, that 20,000, that's all theirs, right? They don't
that's
have to
all
share
theirs.
that with investors. Correct.
And so when the Oni purchases the home and we do all of these things, then the LLC just, I guess, disintegrates or ends
Correct.
because it's going to be an LLC for that
Purpose
property
only.
only.
Correct.
So that, you know, okay, I'm not coming up with the right word, disbands, I guess.
Mhm.
The LLC ends. Those investors now take that money and then reinvest on the next opportunity.
Correct. That's exactly right.
That's very interesting. That's just such a crazy concept that I've never heard of. And how well you've only been doing it a couple of years, so I'll give myself some grace
But
that
if you think about it,
that I
if you
haven't
think
heard of
about
it.
it, Robin, it makes complete sense, right? I mean, there's
It
nothing.
does.
Um, all we've done is we've rethought the concept of financing, and we've put all of it under one umbrella.
Yeah.
The Oni portion, i.e. the customer portion, and the investor portion, and we're the platform that you know acquires funds and onboards investors, right, and manages the fund for them and manages dividends and all of that. And at the same time, we manage customer acquisition and property management to enable home buyers to get into the program and then eventually get out of the program with a mortgage.
Well, and it's, and like you were mentioning before, if a person takes care of a home, it improves it, keeps the value continues to go with the market. It's unfortunately with a lot of rental homes, when the owner goes to sell it, it hasn't been well cared for.
Right.
It
Right.
has, knocks of holes in the walls or stains in the carpet, and maybe the landscaping hasn't been kept up and those sorts of things. But if somebody has an interest in keeping the value of that home up, they're going to take better care of that house.
That's exactly right.
Therefore, I mean,
And I
it,
can tell you how much that's worth. And you know how
how
much
much
it's
is
worth?
that worth?
It's 60% lower maintenance cost annually in the homes that are in our portfolio compared to rental homes.
Really?
Yeah, because
Really?
our customers do exactly as you described, right? They fix things, they take care of things, right? The light fixture breaks or the wall needs repainting, they do it rather than calling their landlord, right? So
Right.
as an investor, you're getting that lower maintenance cost and you're getting zero vacancy, right? And
Right.
no turnover because it's a long-term
That's
lease,
true.
right? The customer's in the home with the intention of buying it. So they're not going to leave. And then you don't have, as an investor, if you think back to a kind of traditional landlord, you don't have the remarketing and the turnover costs and the vacancy, right?
So
That
the
you,
slumlord idea goes away, right?
yes. And the homes we finance are far from slumlords.
From yes. So let's put on our investor hat for quickly. So now I'm an investor and I really like this idea, right? I like the idea that I can throw my money to you. You take care of everything. I don't have to fix anything. I don't have to do this, but I like the idea and the give back of helping out a first time home buyer that may not ever be able to get over the hurdle.
Yeah.
What do I have to have? What do I have to be? Who do I have to be a part of that?
Be the leader you know you can be. Build your professional network and access education that takes you where you want to go. We are women of all ages and backgrounds. You deserve national recognition and opportunities to build relationships with people you want to work and grow with. Hit the ground running with the Charisma chapter of the American Business Women's Association. Meetings each month from 6 to 8:30 p.m. on the fourth Tuesday in Farmers Branch, Texas, and online. Come with us. Experience ABWA for yourself. Go to charisma.abwa.org to learn more.
What do I have to have? What do I have to be? Who do I have to be a part of that?
Yeah. So today, to invest in Ownify or the Ownify Home Fund, you have to be an accredited investor. So
Okay.
we've launched a fund called the Ownify Home Fund, and that accepts investments starting at 25,000 from accredited investors only. So you have to meet that
Okay. So
SEC.
define accredited investor for those that don't know.
You can look it up on the SEC website, but the quick math is you have to have income of 200,000 if you're a single person, or 300,000 if you're married or couple, family, or net worth of at least $1 million.
Okay.
Right. So that's a hurdle. Um,
Yep.
and folks who meet that definition are considered by the SEC to be, capable of making more risky investments or investments in private securities, which is what
Okay.
this is. And so the fund itself is a 506c fund that takes on the investment. The target return is 15% IRR. And the hold period is 5 years, which is basically the length of the on ramp, right? If you
Right.
think about it. So for an investor, you're putting money into the fund, which means you're funding all of the homes in a diversified fashion. You're not picking, oh, I want to fund Robin's home, but I don't like
Okay.
Frank, so I'm not going to fund his home. Right?
Frank can go kick rocks. Robin gets the house.
Right. So you can't do that, right? Again, back to, and you can't show up for barbecue on Saturdays either. But as an investor,
Exactly.
you invest in the fund, and the fund then invests in all the homes, right? And so as an investor, the benefit of that is that you don't have to get involved in the decision making, and B, you're diversified, right? So
Right.
if Frank's home goes belly up for some reason, the roof gets blown off, right? You're not on the hook for that as an individual
Okay.
investor.
Things.
Yeah.
So you've really, this has only been off the ground like in this form for 2 years. Is that right?
We started 2 years ago. We launched last year in Raleigh, Durham.
Okay.
So we have a small portfolio of homes in Raleigh. We'll at the end of this year, we'll be about 30 homes between North Carolina and Tennessee, which is the second market. And yeah, and we're looking at, how do we make this work in Texas and in Florida and in California and, all the large markets. Really focused on markets where you have continuing increase in home prices, right? You have good fundamentals, job creation, people moving into those
Mhm.
metros. You have because of that, you have the affordability challenge, more and more people getting squeezed out, right? And so the challenge on the one hand creates an opportunity for us to help the consumer, and at the same time creates that appreciation potential and the return potential for the investor, right? And so in a way, what we've done is we've looked at this and said, this is a big generational problem, right? It's not going to
Yeah.
go away anytime soon.
Mhm.
There has to be a solution that can help solve this problem and be profitable for investors at the same time. And so a big part of the reason it took us 2 years to get it off the ground is really dialing in the math such that you provide a lot of benefit to the consumer with the lower down payment, monthly payment savings, right? All of that. Yet at the same time, enough return to the investor that we can attract capital.
Right.
And if that gets out of whack, that balance doesn't work, then you can't attract enough capital or can't attract enough consumers, right?
Right.
It needs to be a fair balance here.
So right now you're only able to do this in North Carolina and Tennessee, is that correct? So you're working to develop into, I mean, because there's legislation, every state's different and what they
Correct.
require, just so that our listeners understand that it's not just I live in Indiana and I want to do this.
As an investor, you can come into the fund anywhere in the 50 states, right? So
Okay.
on the investor side, it's open to anyone in the US, any accredited investor. As a consumer, we're doing this on a state by state basis because of state level
Right.
laws and legislation around rent to own, around purchase option, around equity ownership, around how LLCs work, right? There's all these.
Yeah, that's all.
things.
And that's run by the states.
That's run by the state.
So there's
Exactly right.
nothing, and just like everything else, every state is different.
Yep.
So let me throw this out there. Why don't you attack Texas? Because I think that would be a good opportunity for you. It would really help a lot of our folks here.
Absolutely. I mean,
what
it is
state
one
are
of the
you
largest.
working
It is one of the largest markets,
Yeah.
right? And you look at all of
Yeah.
the metro areas, right? Whether Dallas or Houston, Austin, San Antonio, right? I
Growing
mean,
so fast.
growing fast. Lots of people moving there. Lots of young people. Lots of folks who have the income but maybe don't have the savings, right? So this is
Yeah.
definitely a problem that we can solve. But you're also right that Texas is unique in how laws around rent to own in particular work around fractional ownership. So we're working through that, and
Yeah, I've only found one other resource, and it's different than it's where they just you find the house, they buy it, and they rent it back to you with a prearranged. There's no ownership part of it though.
Yeah.
There's no equity ownership that benefits, the consumer, right? So they still, when they decide to buy it, they still have to have a down payment. They still have to have all these things to be able to even purchase that house 3 or 5 years down the road.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I don't think anyone has done what we're doing with the equity ownership, the true ownership, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out how to give someone and there is incremental cost to us and complexity in figuring out how to set up and run these LLCs. But once we
Yeah.
figured that out, it's becoming more and more efficient, right? And so that is a real benefit. And what we hear from our customers is they really appreciate this notion of, yes, I'm building equity. It's just like shares I have in my, E-Trade account. I can see my brick count at the Ownify portal. I know what they're worth. I
Yeah.
know how much I've built, right? That's important.
Well, and in a traditional mortgage, all you're looking at is that principal and hoping that's going down, right? You're looking
Yeah.
at in a traditional mortgage, but this, at least with this, you're looking and going, okay, now hey, honey, we got a new brick. We earned a new brick, honey. So you can gamify it a little bit, right? And when you can gamify something, I think you can tie
So
into it.
you might find this interesting. One thing we're working on is this around gamification, right? This notion of, okay, let's say as a homeowner, you should drain your water tank, right? Once a year.
Right.
What your water heater, right? So, okay, do most people do that?
No.
Okay, fine. So let's send you a video of how to drain your water tank, right? Your water heater. And you send us a video of you having done it. We'll send you an extra 2 bricks, right? And we'll put it into your account as a reward, right? And if you think
Yeah.
about it, we just gave you
That's
2 bricks.
brilliant.
Let's say they're worth $80, right? For taking care of the property.
Yeah.
And what does that do? Well, it extends the life of the water heater by another, who knows, 6 months, right? And therefore, that's good for all of us, investors and ownees, right? And
Yeah.
so we can use the brick concept to gamify some of the ownership components, right? Water heater, take care of the front
That's
yard
awesome.
and whatnot.
Yeah. But that's what ties people and keeps them emotionally tied to it, right? Often you buy a house and just even like you just said, the water heater. Nobody drains their water heater. I don't know anybody that drains their water heater once a year. Never met one. 16 years. I don't do mine. Sounds like a lot of,
So maybe for all the homeowners on the pod, do that, right?
just
Mine is
this weekend, go drain your water heater.
it's the summer. You don't need it anyway,
All
right?
of a sudden, Dallas, the streets are flooded with people. All right. So, Frank, tell me one thing that we didn't touch on. I feel like we talked about so many things. Is there anything that we may have missed or that you want to emphasize for anybody that might be listening today?
No, I think we covered it all. If you're a homeowner and you're in Texas or you're an aspiring homeowner, come reach out. We're building the wait list, and I'd love to be able to start in
Okay.
Texas and say, hey, here are 50 people that we got through Robin's podcast, right?
I love that.
And if you're an investor looking to help and invest and earn a good return, come ping me and come check out Ownify or ping me. But yeah, I think there's a lot here in the detail, and we got through a bunch of it. So
we gotta, I think we got enough to raise some curiosity, if nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'll make sure all of the information and how to reach you, the website, and all of that is in our show notes to make sure that all that gets distributed. And if anybody's listening, you have any questions, reach out to me, reach out to Frank. This is it's new. It's a great opportunity. I think I'm intrigued by it. I'm looking forward to Frank calling me and saying, Robin, we're open in Texas.
You'll be the first to know, Robin.
And then we will do this again and shout from the rooftops, because I know there's so many people that I come across that just can't, and it by no fault of their own, but just, can't get over those hurdles. And as prices in these big metropolitan areas, as well as everywhere, but in places like Dallas and Houston and Austin and things like that, are just The prices are just going up, not as
Yeah,
insane as they were a few years ago, but they are still climbing. And that I don't see that changing anytime soon.
I agree. I agree.
So, all right, Frank. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you for listening to another episode of Relax, I Got This. Make sure you tune in next time and hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for Relax I Got This with Texas Realtor Robin McCoy. Check out all the show notes for contact information on Robin and her guests and to access your free buyer and seller guides. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a conversation. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Relax I Got This with Robin McCoy.